Maya Chen walked through the crowded space station corridors, her maintenance uniform blending perfectly with hundreds of other workers. Nobody gave her a second look as she carried her toolkit toward the docking bay. To everyone around her, she was just another mechanic heading to fix broken ships. The massive Titan station buzzed with activity. Merchants argued over prices, soldiers marched in formation, and politicians discussed trade deals in hushed voices. Maya had watched this same scene play out for 3 years now, ever since she arrived as a refugee from the outer colonies. Her small apartment in the worker quarters told the same story as thousands of others. A single bed, a tiny kitchen, and walls covered with technical manuals about ship engines and life support systems. What nobody knew was that hidden beneath her mattress lay a different kind of manual. Advanced fighter pilot techniques from the Earth Military Academy. Maya had graduated top of her class 5 years ago. She could fly anything with wings, engines, or thrusters. Her instructors said she had natural talent that came along once in a generation. She could read enemy flight patterns like a book and predict their moves before they made them. But all of that felt like a lifetime ago. The war with the Krex Empire had changed everything. Her home planet of Kepler 442b had been one of the first to fall. She remembered the day clearly, the sky turning red with enemy ships, the evacuation sirens screaming across the colonies, families running with whatever they could carry. Maya had been visiting her sick grandmother when the attack began. By the time she reached the spaceport, all the military transports were gone. She grabbed the last seat on a civilian cargo ship, leaving behind her uniform, her medals, and her entire identity as Lieutenant Maya Chen of the Earth Defense Force. Now she was just another refugee who fixed broken heating systems and patched hull leaks. The irony wasn't lost on her that she spent her days repairing the very ships she had once flown into battle. Her hands, which had once gripped fighter jet controls, now held wrenches and welding torches. The Titan station served as a major hub for military operations. Every day she watched fighter squadrons return from missions against the Krex. Some came back with damage, others didn't come back at all. She listened to the pilots talk in the cantina about their battles, their victories, and their losses. She wanted to tell them about better tactics, about the weaknesses in Krex formations that she had discovered during her academy training. But she stayed silent. Her supervisor, Marcus Webb, was a good man who had given her a chance when she had nothing. He didn't ask too many questions about her past, and she was grateful for that. Marcus ran the maintenance crew with fairness and treated his workers like family. Maya respected him too much to lie about her background, so she simply never talked about it. The truth was dangerous for many reasons. If Earth Command discovered that a trained pilot was working as a mechanic, they would immediately draft her back into service. But Maya had seen too much death, too much destruction. She had lost friends, watched good people die in explosions of fire and metal. The thought of climbing back into a cockpit made her hands shake. Besides, there were practical problems too. Her military records were probably lost when Kepler 442b fell. She had no way to prove who she really was. Without proper identification and clearance, she would be treated as a potential spy or security risk. The military didn't trust refugees, especially ones claiming to have special training, so Maya kept her head down and did her job. She became known as the mechanic who could fix anything. Pilots specifically requested her to work on their ships because she understood the systems better than anyone else. They didn't know why she was so good at her job. They just knew their ships flew better after she worked on them. Some nights, Maya would sneak into the observation deck and watch the stars. She could identify every type of ship that passed by, from massive cargo haulers to sleek military fighters. Her fingers would unconsciously move as if she was still flying, muscle memory from thousands of hours in simulators and real combat missions. The worst part was the helplessness. Every day brought news of more colonies falling to the Krex Empire. More refugees arrived at the station with stories of destruction and loss. Maya knew she could make a difference if she was back in the cockpit, but fear and circumstances kept her trapped in her false identity. She had convinced herself that this quiet life was better. No more watching friends die. No more impossible missions against overwhelming odds. No more sleepless nights worrying about the next battle. But deep inside, a part of her felt like a coward for hiding while others fought and died. Maya didn't know that everything was about to change. She didn't know that within days her carefully constructed new life would be torn apart. She didn't know that the biggest Krex assault in the war was heading straight for Titan Station, and that soon, Her choice between safety and duty would be taken away from her. As she walked toward another routine maintenance job, Maya had no idea that destiny was about to find her, whether she was ready for it or not. The emergency alarm started screaming at 600 hours, jolting Maya awake from restless sleep. Red warning lights flashed through her small window, painting the walls in urgent crimson. She had heard these alarms during drills before, but this time felt different. This time the sound carried real fear. Maya quickly dressed and rushed to the main corridor, joining hundreds of other station residents who looked confused and worried. The intercom crackled to life with Admiral Harrison's voice, usually calm and controlled, now tight with tension. All civilian personnel report to designated safe zones immediately. This is not a drill. We have confirmed Krek's fleet movement toward Titan Station. Military personnel report to battle stations. This is not a drill. The crowd around Maya began to panic. People pushed and shoved, trying to reach the safe zones in the station's center. Children cried while parents carried emergency bags. Maya moved against the flow of people, heading toward the docking bay where she worked. If ships were going into battle, they would need every mechanic available. She found Marcus Webb in the main hangar, surrounded by chaos. Pilots ran toward their fighters while ground crews worked frantically to prep ships for launch. The massive bay doors were already opening, revealing the star-filled darkness of space beyond. "Maya, thank goodness you're here," Marcus called out over the noise. "We need all hands working. The entire defense fleet is launching and half these ships have maintenance issues." Maya nodded and grabbed her toolkit, but as she looked around the hangar, her heart sank. She counted only 18 operational fighters ready for launch. Through her maintenance work, she knew the station's full defensive capability. They should have had 42 fighters available for combat. "Marcus, where are the other squadrons?" she asked, trying to keep the concern out of her voice. His face was grim, lost in the last 3 engagements. "We're down to skeleton crews. Command is hoping reinforcements arrive before the Krek's fleet gets here." Maya watched the pilots climbing into their cockpits, and she recognized most of them. These weren't the experienced veterans who had defended the station for years. Most of those pilots were dead. These were young recruits, some barely out of training, about to face the most dangerous enemy in the galaxy, with insufficient numbers and limited experience. Lieutenant Jake Morrison, barely 20 years old, struggled with his pre-flight checklist in the fighter nearest to Maya. She had worked on his ship the previous week, and had noticed his inexperience then. His hands shook as he tried to start the engines, and Maya could see sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool hangar air. "Problem with your startup sequence?" Maya asked, approaching his fighter. "The engine sync is off," Jake replied, frustration clear in his voice. "I've tried the procedure 3 times, but something's wrong." Maya climbed up to look at his control panel. In seconds, she spotted the issue, a simple mistake in the power distribution sequence that any experienced pilot would have caught immediately. But she also noticed something else that made her blood run cold. The tactical display showed the approaching Krek's fleet. 47 heavy cruisers, 6 dreadnoughts, and over 200 fighter craft. This wasn't just an attack. It was an invasion force designed to completely destroy Titan Station and everything in this sector. "There," Maya said, correcting Jake's startup sequence. "Your engines should sync properly now." "Thanks," Jake said, relief evident in his voice. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Maya stepped back as his fighter powered up correctly, but her mind was racing. She had studied Krek's fleet formations extensively during her academy training. This particular formation was designed for maximum destruction, with minimal losses to their own forces. The Earth defense fighters were flying straight into a trap. She watched the first wave of defenders launch from the hangar, their blue engine trails disappearing into the darkness. Through the tactical displays scattered around the hangar, she could track their progress toward the enemy fleet. What she saw made her stomach twist with dread. The Kreks had positioned their forces in a classic pincer formation. The human fighters were heading straight toward what appeared to be a weakly defended center, but it was actually bait. Once the defenders committed to their attack run, Krek's fighters would sweep in from both sides, surrounding and destroying them. "Marcus," Maya called urgently. "Someone needs to warn the flight commander." "The Krek's formation is a trap. What do you mean?" Marcus asked, pausing in his work. Maya hesitated. How could she explain her knowledge without revealing her military background? I've seen this formation before in historical combat footage. The center is bait. They'll be surrounded. Marcus looked at her strangely but keyed his radio. "Control, this is Hangar Chief Webb. We have concerns about the enemy formation." The response crackled back immediately. "Webb, we don't have time for speculation from maintenance staff. Stay off the tactical channel." Maya watched the display in growing horror as the human fighters approached the Krex formation exactly as she had predicted. In minutes, those brave young pilots would fly straight into a massacre, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. She looked around the hangar at the few remaining fighters that were still being prepped for a second wave launch. Most were in poor condition, requiring extensive repairs that would take hours. But in the corner sat a single F-78 Raptor, one of the newest and most advanced fighters in the human fleet. Maya knew that fighter well. She had personally maintained it for the past month. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Rodriguez had been its pilot, but she had been killed in action 3 days ago. The ship was ready for combat, fully armed and fueled, but there was no pilot assigned to it. An insane idea began to form in Maya's mind. She looked at the tactical display again, watching her former colleagues flying toward certain death. She thought about all the colonies that had already fallen, all the people who had died while she hid in safety. The sound of laser fire echoed through space as the first engagement began. On the display, she could see the human fighters suddenly surrounded by Krex forces, just as she had predicted. 2 blue dots disappeared immediately, representing real people she had spoken to just minutes before. Maya made her decision. She couldn't stand by and watch good people die when she had the skills to help them. Fear had controlled her choices for too long. She might be a coward, but she wouldn't be a coward who let others die for her safety. She walked toward the F-78 Raptor, her heart pounding with anticipation and terror. After 3 years of hiding, Maya Chen was about to become a pilot again. Maya's hands trembled as she approached the F-78 Raptor. The sleek fighter sat in its maintenance bay like a sleeping predator, its weapons pods loaded and ready for combat. She had spent countless hours working on this ship, knowing every system, every component, every capability it possessed. "Maya, what are you doing?" Marcus called out, noticing her heading toward the fighter instead of working on repairs. She turned to face him, and for the first time in 3 years, she told someone the truth about who she really was. "Marcus, I need you to trust me. I'm not just a mechanic. I'm Lieutenant Maya Chen, formerly of the Earth Defense Force, Fighter Squadron 12. Marcus stared at her in shock. "What are you talking about?" "Maya, this isn't the time for jokes." "I'm not joking," she replied, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I graduated top of my class from the Earth Military Academy. I have over 800 hours of combat flight time. I've flown missions against Krex forces before, and I know how to beat them." The tactical display nearby showed another human fighter disappearing in a burst of enemy laser fire. Maya pointed to the screen. "Those pilots are flying into a trap and they don't even know it. In about 2 minutes, the Krex fighters will complete their encirclement and we'll lose our entire first wave." Marcus looked from Maya to the display, then back to her face. Something in her eyes convinced him that she was telling the truth. "Even if you are who you say you are, you can't just steal a military fighter. You'll be court-martialed." "Better to be court-martialed than to watch good people die when I could have saved them," Maya replied. She was already climbing into the Raptor's cockpit, her muscle memory taking over as she strapped herself into the pilot's seat. The familiar feeling of being in a fighter cockpit washed over her like coming home after a long journey. Her hands found the controls automatically, and the pre-flight checklist ran through her mind as if she had flown yesterday instead of 3 years ago. But her hands were shaking so badly she could barely activate the startup sequence. "Maya, stop!" Marcus called out. "There has to be another way." "There is no other way," she replied, forcing her breathing to slow down and her hands to steady. "The Krex are using a pincer formation with a false center. Our fighters think they're attacking a weak point, but it's bait. Once they commit to the attack run, they'll be surrounded and destroyed." The Raptor's engines came online with a low hum that built to a powerful roar. Maya felt the familiar vibration through the ship's hull, and despite her fear, part of her smiled. She had forgotten how good it felt to be connected to a machine designed for speed and combat. On her tactical display, she could see the battle unfolding exactly as she had predicted. The human fighters were now completely surrounded by Krex forces. Laser fire lit up the darkness of space as desperate pilots tried to fight their way out of the trap. "Control, this is Raptor 7 requesting immediate launch clearance," Maya called over the radio using the fighter's designation. Raptor 7, you are not cleared for launch. Lieutenant Rodriguez is KIA and no replacement pilot has been assigned. Maya took a deep breath. Control, this is Lieutenant Maya Chen, serial number Delta 77 Alpha 9. I am taking command of Raptor 7 under emergency combat protocols. There was a long pause on the radio. Maya knew they were probably checking military databases, trying to figure out who she was and why her name wasn't on any current duty rosters. But she didn't have time to wait for bureaucracy. Marcus, she called over her helmet radio. Can you activate the launch bay doors? Marcus hesitated for only a moment before running to the control panel. Maya, I hope you know what you're doing. So do I, she replied honestly. The massive hangar doors began to open, revealing the battle raging in space beyond. Maya could see laser fire exchanging between human and Krex fighters, and the occasional explosion as someone's luck ran out. On her tactical display, she counted only 12 human fighters still active out of the original 18. Raptor 7, you are not authorized for launch. Return to your berth immediately, the control tower ordered. Maya ignored the order and engaged her engines. The Raptor shot forward out of the hangar and into the battle zone. After 3 years on the ground, she was flying again, and despite everything, it felt incredible. But her relief was short-lived as she got her first close look at the battle. The surviving human fighters were scattered and disorganized, trying to fight their way out of a perfect Krex encirclement. The enemy had them exactly where they wanted them, confused, separated, and easy targets. Maya activated her ship's communication system and broadcast on the emergency frequency that all human fighters would be monitoring. All Earth defense fighters, this is Raptor 7. Break off your current attack runs immediately and form up on my position. Who is this? Came the reply from one of the pilots. Raptor 7 is Rodriguez's ship and she's dead. This is Lieutenant Maya Chen. I'm taking tactical command of this engagement. Trust me, you're flying into a trap. Follow my lead, and we can get out of this. Maya could hear the doubt in the pilots' voices, but they were desperate enough to listen to anyone who sounded like they knew what they were doing. Slowly, the surviving fighters began to break off their attack runs and move toward Maya's position. She looked at her tactical display and began to formulate a plan. The Krex thought they had won this engagement, that the human fighters were beaten and disorganized. They were about to learn that having Maya Chen back in a cockpit changed everything. But first, she had to deal with her own fear. Her hands were still shaking, and her heart was racing so fast she could hear it over the engine noise. The last time she had been in combat, she had watched her squadron leader die in an explosion of fire and metal. The trauma of that loss had driven her into hiding for 3 years. Maya forced herself to focus on the tactical situation rather than her fear. She had a job to do, and 12 pilots were counting on her to get them out of this alive. She could deal with her emotions later, assuming there was a later. All fighters form up in Delta formation and follow my lead, she commanded. We're going to show these Krex what happens when they mess with Earth Defense Forces. Maya's tactical display showed the Krex formation clearly now that she was in the middle of the battle. The enemy had 46 fighters arranged in 3 groups, with the human defenders trapped in the center. It was a textbook pincer movement, designed to destroy trapped forces with minimal losses to the attackers. But Maya had studied this formation extensively during her academy training. She knew its strengths, but more importantly, she knew its weaknesses. The Krex were so confident in their trap that they had left themselves vulnerable to a counterattack if someone knew where to hit them. All fighters, listen carefully, Maya broadcast to the surviving human pilots. The Krex formation has a weak point at coordinates 77 Mark 42, but we need to hit it fast and hard all at once. How do you know that? Asked Lieutenant Morrison, the young pilot she had helped in the hangar. His fighter was trailing smoke from laser damage, but he was still flying. Because I've fought this formation before, Maya replied, which was technically true. Jake, how's your ship holding up? Engine problems, but I can still fight, Jake responded. Maya quickly assessed the condition of all 12 remaining fighters. 3 were severely damaged, but still combat capable. 2 had weapons problems, but could provide support. The rest were in decent shape for a sustained engagement. Here's what we're going to do, Maya explained, her confidence growing as she slipped back into her role as a tactical commander. We're going to feint toward the left flank, make them think we're trying to break out that way. When they move to intercept us, we'll reverse course and hit their weak point. That sounds crazy, replied Commander Torres, the senior pilot among the survivors. What if they don't take the bait? They will, Maya said with certainty. Krex pilots are trained to respond to specific situations in specific ways. They don't improvise well, which is their biggest weakness. Trust me on this. Maya took a deep breath and pushed her fighter into the lead position. Her fear was still there, but it was now mixed with something else, the thrill of being back where she belonged. For the first time in 3 years, she felt like herself again. All fighters, form up on me. We're going to move as one unit. When I say break, everyone turns hard to starboard and follows me to the target coordinates. Questions? There were none. The pilots might not know who she was, but her confidence and clear tactical thinking had earned their trust. They formed up behind her Raptor in perfect formation, waiting for her command. Maya led them toward the left flank of the Krex formation, flying straight at a group of 15 enemy fighters. Her tactical display showed the Krex doing exactly what she had predicted. The center and right flank groups were moving to support the left flank, thinking the humans were making a desperate breakout attempt. Steady, Maya called to her pilots as Krex laser fire began to light up the space around them. Hold formation. Almost there. The distance closed rapidly. Maya could see the individual Krex fighters now, their distinctive angular designs growing larger in her view screen. Her weapon's targeting system was showing multiple locks, and every instinct told her to open fire. But timing was everything in this maneuver. Now, Maya shouted. All fighters break right and follow me in. 12 human fighters turned as one, racing toward the weak point in the Krex formation that was now completely exposed. The enemy pilots were caught completely off guard by the sudden reversal, their ships out of position to defend against the new attack vector. Maya's finger found the trigger for her laser cannons, and suddenly she was in combat again after 3 years of hiding. The familiar sound of weapon discharge filled her cockpit, and her first shot struck a Krex fighter dead center, destroying it in a brilliant explosion. Target acquired, called Jake Morrison, his voice filled with excitement as his weapons found their mark. Multiple hits on enemy formation, reported Commander Torres. The human fighters tore through the exposed Krex group like a sword through paper. In less than 30 seconds, they had destroyed 8 enemy fighters and scattered the rest. The perfect Krex formation was now broken, with confused enemy pilots trying to regroup and figure out what had gone wrong with their trap. But Maya wasn't finished. She knew that in combat, momentum was everything. When your enemy was confused and off balance, that was when you pressed your advantage. All fighters maintain attack formation. We're going after the center group before they can reorganize, Maya commanded. Her tactical display showed the remaining Krex fighters trying to form a defensive line, but they were no longer fighting on their terms. The hunters had become the hunted, and Maya intended to make them pay for every human pilot they had killed. The second attack was even more devastating than the first. Maya led her fighters in a coordinated assault that destroyed 6 more Krex ships, while taking only minor damage in return. Her years of academy training and combat experience were coming back to her like riding a bicycle. Once learned, never forgotten. Maya, you're incredible. Jake called over the radio. Where did you learn to fight like this? Maya smiled grimly as she lined up another enemy fighter in her targeting scope. I learned from the best, and I had a really good teacher. Necessity. Her finger pressed the trigger again, and another Krex fighter disappeared in a ball of fire and debris. But even as she celebrated the successful attack, Maya was already planning the next move. The Krex still outnumbered them almost 3-1, and the enemy would adapt to her tactics if she gave them time. The battle was far from over, but for the first time since the engagement began, Maya believed they might actually win. She had found her confidence again, and more importantly, she had found her purpose. She wasn't just a mechanic hiding from her past anymore. She was Lieutenant Maya Chen, pilot and tactician, and she was back where she belonged. On her tactical display, she could see reinforcements approaching from Titan Station. The second wave of defenders was finally launching. But Maya also noticed something else that made her blood run cold. The Krex dreadnoughts were moving into position, and their massive weapons were beginning to target the station itself. The fighter battle was just the opening act. The real test was still to come. The second wave of human fighters arrived, just as Maya was regrouping her surviving pilots. 18 fresh defenders launched from Titan Station, their engines bright against the darkness of space. But Maya's celebration was cut short when she saw what was happening on her long-range scanners. The 6 Krex dreadnoughts were moving into attack position, their massive hulls bristling with weapons that could reduce Titan Station to debris in minutes. These weren't just battleships. They were planet killers designed to destroy entire colonies from orbit. "All fighters, this is Admiral Harrison," came the voice from Titan Station's command center. "We have confirmation that the Krex fleet is preparing for a full assault on the station. All available ships are to intercept the dreadnoughts immediately." Maya looked at her tactical display and felt her heart sink. 40 human fighters against 6 dreadnoughts and their escort vessels was barely better than suicide. The math was simple and terrible. They didn't have enough firepower to stop even 1 dreadnought, let alone 6 of them. But as she studied the enemy formation, Maya noticed something that the other pilots had missed. The dreadnoughts were arranged in a tight defensive formation, protecting each other's blind spots. It was smart tactics, but it also created an opportunity if someone was brave enough and skilled enough to exploit it. "Control, this is Lieutenant Chen," Maya called to the station. "I need to speak with Admiral Harrison immediately." "Chen, we don't have time for tactical debates," came the reply. "Follow your orders and attack the dreadnoughts." "Sir, if we attack those ships head-on, we'll all die and accomplish nothing," Maya replied firmly. "But I think there's another way." There was a pause before Admiral Harrison's voice came over the radio. "Chen, I don't know who you are or how you got in that fighter, but right now I'm willing to listen to anyone with ideas." "Make it fast." Maya took a deep breath and shared her plan. "The dreadnoughts are in a mutual defense formation, but that means they're also locked into a specific flight pattern. If we can force them to break formation, we can attack them individually when they're most vulnerable." "How do we force 6 dreadnoughts to break formation?" Admiral Harrison asked skeptically. "We threaten something they value more than maintaining formation," Maya replied. "Their command ship is the lead dreadnought, the one in front. If we can mount a credible attack against it, the others will break formation to protect it. That's still suicide. Chen, no fighter has the firepower to damage a dreadnought's shields." Maya smiled grimly. "No single fighter does. But if we concentrate all our firepower on one specific point on their shield grid, we might be able to create a breach. It would only last for seconds, but it might be enough." She could hear Admiral Harrison discussing the plan with his staff over the open channel. Time was running out. The dreadnoughts were almost in position to begin their bombardment of the station. "All fighters, this is Admiral Harrison. We're going to try Chen's plan. Form up on Lieutenant Chen's position and await tactical instructions." Maya suddenly found herself in command of 36 fighters, the largest combat formation she had ever led. The responsibility was overwhelming, but she pushed her fears aside and focused on the tactical problem. "All pilots, listen carefully," Maya broadcast. "We're going to execute a concentrated assault on the lead dreadnought's forward shield generator. The attack window will be extremely narrow, so timing is critical." She quickly organized the fighters into 6 groups of 6 ships each. Each group would attack from a different angle, making it harder for the dreadnought's defensive weapons to target them all at once. "Remember, we're not trying to destroy the ship," Maya explained. "We just need to damage it enough to force the formation to break up. Once they're separated, we can use hit-and-run tactics against individual ships." Commander Torres, who had been flying combat missions for 5 years, called over the radio. "Chen, I have to ask, how do you know so much about Krex formations and dreadnought tactics?" Maya hesitated before answering. "I spent 2 years studying Krex military doctrine at the Earth Military Academy. I know how they think, how they fight, and how to beat them." "Why haven't we seen you in any combat missions before today?" Torres asked. "Because until today I was hiding," Maya replied honestly. "I lost my squadron in the Battle of Kepler 442b 3 years ago. I thought I could run away from the war, but the war found me anyway." The tactical display showed that the dreadnoughts had reached their attack positions. Weapon ports were opening along their massive hulls, preparing to unleash destruction on Titan Station and its 50,000 residents. "All fighters, this is it," Maya announced. "Attack groups 1 through 6, begin your approach. Stay tight, stay fast, and trust your training." Maya led the first attack group directly toward the lead dreadnought, her Raptor racing through space at maximum speed. The massive enemy ship grew larger and larger in her view screen, its hull bristling with defensive weapons that were beginning to track her fighter. Laser fire erupted from the dreadnought's point defense systems, filling space with deadly light. Maya jinked and rolled her fighter, using every evasive maneuver she had learned during her academy training. Around her, the other fighters in her group followed her lead, staying in tight formation despite the increasing enemy fire. 30 seconds to target, Maya called out, watching her targeting computer calculate the optimal firing solution. All groups prepare to engage on my mark. The distance closed rapidly. Maya could see individual weapon ports on the Dreadnought's hull now, and she could feel the heat from nearby laser blasts through her fighter's armor. One pilot in her group took a direct hit and spiraled away in flames, but the rest held formation. 10 seconds, Maya announced. All fighters target the forward shield generator and fire everything you have. Maya's finger found the trigger, and suddenly 35 human fighters opened fire simultaneously, concentrating all their weapons on a single point on the massive enemy ship. For a moment, the Dreadnought's shields flared brilliant white as they absorbed the incredible amount of energy focused on them. Then, impossibly, a section of the shield grid flickered and failed. For just 3 seconds, there was a gap in the Dreadnought's defenses, and Maya seized the opportunity. All fighters concentrate fire on the exposed hull section, she commanded, pouring laser fire into the breach. The combined assault tore through the Dreadnought's armor plating and penetrated deep into the ship's interior. Explosions erupted along the massive hull as critical systems were damaged or destroyed. Most importantly, the lead Dreadnought began to fall back, breaking formation as its captain tried to assess the damage and protect his wounded ship. Just as Maya had predicted, the other 5 Dreadnoughts moved to protect their flagship, abandoning their coordinated attack formation. It worked, Jake Morrison called out excitedly. The formation is broken. Maya allowed herself a moment of satisfaction, but she knew the battle was far from over. They had damaged 1 Dreadnought and disrupted the enemy formation, but 5 massive warships were still perfectly capable of destroying Titan Station. The real fight was just beginning, and Maya was about to prove that a mechanic who had been hiding for 3 years could still be the most dangerous pilot in the galaxy. With the Krex Dreadnought formation broken, Maya quickly assessed the new tactical situation. The damaged lead ship was retreating behind the protection of 2 others, while the remaining 3 Dreadnoughts were repositioning to continue their attack on Titan Station. But now they were spread out and vulnerable to coordinated fighter attacks. All fighters break into smaller groups, Maya commanded. We're going to use hit-and-run tactics against individual targets. Groups Alpha and Beta take the Dreadnought on the left flank. Charlie and Delta groups target the one on the right. Echo and Foxtrot, you're with me. We're going after the center ship. Maya led her 12 fighters toward the massive warship, its dark hull stretching nearly 2 kilometers from bow to stern. She had fought Dreadnoughts before during the Kepler campaign, but never with such a small force. The key was to stay mobile and target specific weak points rather than trying to engage in a direct firepower exchange. Remember, Dreadnoughts have blind spots, Maya explained to her pilots as they approached. Their main weapons can't track fast-moving targets that get in close. We need to stay under their defensive fire arcs. The Dreadnought's captain realized what Maya was planning and began rotating his ship to bring more weapons to bear on the approaching fighters. But the massive vessel was slow to respond, and Maya had already identified her target, the ship's engine cooling vents. All fighters, target the exhaust ports on the stern section, Maya ordered. If we can damage their cooling systems, the ship will have to reduce power or risk an engine overload. Maya dove her Raptor toward the Dreadnought's rear section, skimming just meters above the hull to avoid the ship's defensive lasers. Behind her, 11 other fighters followed in perfect formation, their weapons charging for the attack. The exhaust vents were heavily armored, but Maya knew from her academy training that they had to have weak points to function properly. She targeted the connection points where the vents met the main hull, areas that needed to be less armored to allow for thermal expansion. Fire, Maya commanded, and 12 fighters poured laser fire into the Dreadnought's engine section. The attack was devastating. Multiple exhaust vents were destroyed, and Maya could see secondary explosions deep inside the enemy ship as damaged cooling systems failed. The Dreadnought's engines began to flicker as automatic safety systems tried to prevent a catastrophic overload. Direct hit, called Lieutenant Sarah Park, one of the newer pilots. Their engine output is dropping. But Maya's celebration was cut short when her tactical display showed a new problem. The 2 Dreadnoughts protecting the damaged flagship had finished repositioning and were targeting Titan Station with their main weapons. In less than 2 minutes, they would begin their bombardment. "Control, this is Lieutenant Chen," Maya called to the station. "I need a damage assessment on all Krex vessels immediately." Admiral Harrison's voice crackled back over the radio. "Chen, we show significant damage to 3 dreadnoughts, but the other 3 are still combat effective. And we've lost 8 fighters in the attacks." Maya felt each lost pilot like a physical blow. These weren't just numbers on a tactical display. They were people she had commanded into battle, people who had trusted her leadership. But she couldn't let grief interfere with her tactical thinking. "Sir, I need permission to attempt something that's never been tried before," Maya said. "What do you have in mind, Lieutenant?" Maya took a deep breath before explaining her plan. "I want to take 6 fighters on a direct assault against the flagship. If we can destroy or disable their command ship, the other dreadnoughts will lose coordination and fall back." There was a long pause before Admiral Harrison responded. "Chen, that's suicide." "No fighter attack has ever successfully destroyed a dreadnought." "No individual fighter attack," Maya corrected. "But if we can get inside their defensive perimeter and attack from multiple vectors simultaneously, we might be able to overwhelm their point defense systems." Maya could hear heated discussion in the background before the Admiral came back on the channel. "Lieutenant, I'm looking at your service record now. You graduated first in your class at the Academy, and you have more combat experience than any pilot in this engagement. If you think it can work, then you have my permission to try." Maya quickly selected 5 of her most experienced pilots for the mission. Commander Torres, Lieutenant Morrison, Lieutenant Park, Lieutenant Williams, and Lieutenant Kumar, all pilots who had proven themselves in the battle so far. "Listen carefully," Maya explained to her chosen team. "We're going to approach the flagship at maximum speed from 6 different angles. The key is timing. We all have to arrive at the target simultaneously, or their defensive fire will pick us off one by one." Lieutenant Williams, a veteran pilot with over 300 combat hours, voiced what everyone was thinking. "Maya, even if we succeed, we probably won't survive the attack. The explosion from a dreadnought will destroy any fighter within several kilometers." "I know," Maya replied quietly. "But if we don't try, Titan Station dies and 50,000 people with it. Sometimes you have to risk everything to save what matters most." Maya looked at her tactical display one final time, checking the positions of all the enemy ships and calculating approach vectors for the attack. The math was brutal. They had perhaps a 20% chance of reaching the target, and almost 0 chance of surviving the mission. But as she prepared for what would likely be her final flight, Maya realized that she wasn't afraid anymore. For 3 years, she had been running from who she was, trying to hide from the responsibility that came with her skills and training. Now finally she was exactly where she belonged. "All fighters, form up on my position," Maya commanded. "We're going to show these Krex that humanity doesn't give up. And we don't go down without a fight." Maya pushed her Raptor to maximum speed, racing toward the enemy flagship with 5 brave pilots following close behind. In the distance, she could see the lights of Titan Station, home to thousands of families who were counting on her to protect them. She had spent 3 years hiding from the war, but the war had found her anyway. Now it was time to finish what the Krex had started when they destroyed her homeworld 3 years ago. Maya Chen was done running, and she was about to remind the galaxy why Earth Defense Force pilots were considered the most dangerous warriors in human space. The final attack was about to begin, and Maya intended to make sure it was one the Krex would never forget. Maya's Raptor screamed through space at maximum velocity, leading 5 other fighters in the most desperate attack of her career. The Krex flagship loomed ahead like a metal mountain, its hull bristling with weapons that were beginning to track the approaching human fighters. "All fighters, remember the timing," Maya called over the radio. "We hit them from 6 vectors simultaneously in 30 seconds. Stay on course no matter what happens." Maya could feel her heart pounding as the distance closed. Around her, space erupted with laser fire as the dreadnought's point defense systems opened up, trying to destroy the attackers before they could reach their target. The Krex had realized what the humans were planning, and they were throwing everything they had at the 6 fighters. Lieutenant Kumar's fighter took a direct hit and exploded in a ball of fire and debris. Maya forced herself not to look, keeping her eyes focused on the targeting computer as it calculated her attack solution. 5 fighters now, racing toward certain death with slim hope of success. 15 seconds, Maya announced, watching Lieutenant Park's fighter spiral away, trailing smoke and flame. 4 fighters now. still closing on the massive enemy ship. Maya's tactical display showed the weak points in the dreadnought's armor, areas where the ship's designers had sacrificed protection for functionality. The main reactor was buried deep inside the hull, but there were power conduits that ran close to the surface in specific locations. 10 seconds. All fighters target the power coupling arrays on your assigned sections. Commander Torres called out over the radio as his fighter shuddered under enemy fire. Maya, it's been an honor flying with you. 5 seconds. Maya replied, her finger hovering over the trigger. Around her, the remaining 3 fighters maintained perfect formation despite the incredible defensive fire surrounding them. Now, Maya shouted. 4 human fighters opened fire simultaneously, pouring all their weapons into specific points on the massive dreadnought's hull. Maya's lasers tore through armor plating and penetrated deep into the ship's interior, finding the primary power coupling she had targeted. The explosion was immediate and catastrophic. Secondary blasts rippled along the dreadnought's hull as power systems overloaded and critical systems failed. Maya pulled her fighter into the steepest climb possible, trying to escape the expanding fireball as the enemy flagship began to tear itself apart. Behind her, Lieutenant Morrison's fighter wasn't fast enough to escape. Maya watched in horror as the young pilot who had looked up to her disappeared in the massive explosion. 3 years of hiding hadn't protected her from this moment, watching good people die under her command. But the mission had succeeded. The Krex flagship was breaking apart, its massive hull split open by internal explosions. On her tactical display, Maya could see the other enemy ships beginning to fall back as their command structure collapsed. All remaining fighters. "This is Admiral Harrison," came the voice from Titan Station. "The Krex fleet is retreating. Repeat, the enemy is retreating. All pilots return to base immediately." Maya looked around and realized that only she, Commander Torres, and Lieutenant Williams had survived the final attack. Out of 36 fighters that had entered the battle, only 15 were returning to base. The victory had come at a terrible cost. As Maya guided her battered Raptor back toward Titan Station, she reflected on everything that had happened. In the span of a few hours, she had gone from being a hidden mechanic to the pilot who had saved the station. But the price had been higher than she ever could have imagined. The hangar bay was crowded with people when Maya's fighter touched down. Ground crews, off-duty pilots, station personnel, and civilians had all gathered to see the pilot who had defeated an entire Krex fleet. As Maya climbed out of her cockpit, the crowd erupted in cheers. Admiral Harrison pushed through the crowd to reach her, his weathered face showing both gratitude and curiosity. "Lieutenant Chen, I think you and I need to have a very long conversation about where you've been for the past 3 years." Maya nodded, suddenly feeling exhausted. "Yes, sir. But first I need to know about the pilots we lost. They have families who need to be notified." "Already being handled," Admiral Harrison assured her. "But Maya, what you did today, leading that defense, organizing the tactical response, taking out 6 enemy ships personally, it's going to be talked about for years. You've become a legend." Maya looked around at the celebrating crowd and felt uncomfortable with the attention. "I'm not a legend, sir. I'm just someone who finally stopped running from her responsibilities." Over the following weeks, Maya's story spread throughout human space. The mechanic, who had turned out to be one of the most skilled pilots in the galaxy, became a symbol of hope for the resistance against the Krex Empire. Her tactical innovations were studied at military academies, and her courage inspired a new generation of pilots. But Maya herself struggled with the aftermath of the battle. The pilots she had lost haunted her dreams, and she found it difficult to accept the praise when so many good people had died. She returned to her small apartment in the worker quarters, trying to process everything that had happened. Marcus Webb found her there 3 days after the battle, sitting alone and staring out the window at the stars. "The whole station is calling you a hero," he said quietly. "But you don't look like someone celebrating." 12 pilots died following my orders," Maya replied. "I keep thinking about Jake Morrison, how excited he was to finally be in combat. He was barely 20 years old, Marcus. He should have had a whole life ahead of him." Marcus sat down beside her. "Maya, if you hadn't taken command, we would have lost everyone, including the 50,000 people on this station. Those pilots didn't die because of your orders. They died protecting something they believed in." Admiral Harrison offered Maya a promotion and command of her own squadron, but she turned it down. Instead, she requested a transfer to the pilot training program. where she could teach others the tactics and techniques that had saved Titan Station. The best way to honor the pilots we lost, Maya explained to the Admiral, is to make sure the next generation is better prepared for what they'll face out there. Maya spent the next 2 years training new pilots, sharing everything she had learned about Krek's tactics and fighter combat. Her students were among the most successful in the fleet, and many of them went on to win crucial battles against the Empire. But Maya never forgot the lesson of that day at Titan Station. Sometimes the people who can make the biggest difference are the ones hiding in plain sight, waiting for the moment when they're needed most. She had spent 3 years running from who she was, but in the end, destiny had found her anyway. The war against the Krek's empire continued for another 5 years before humanity finally achieved victory. Maya Chen became one of the most decorated pilots in human history, but she always remembered that her greatest achievement wasn't the 6 enemy ships she destroyed in record time. Her greatest achievement was learning to stop running from who she was meant to be, and finding the courage to fight for something bigger than herself. In the end, that was what made the difference between victory and defeat, between hope and despair, between a legend and just another mechanic who fixed broken things.